You say they're all happy, but you won't let in independent investigators. You won't let in journalists to go there.
Why not?
They're not allowed to go there.
I will be happy to escort you to Xinjiang.
Really?
Escort.
I can make that promise.
Really?
I will speak to the Chinese government.
Here's the problem,
to the
Victor.
Chinese
I don't
embassy.
want to escort. I don't want minders. I want to go freely. Will you allow that?
Well, when the Westoid hits you with a take so democratic, you just have to hit him with the CCP stare.
It is not a loyalty test. Here, for example, in Britain, if you are a British citizen, you need to support the...
Better dressed than basically any Westerner I see in interviews. It's over for the West.
monarchy. You cannot say,
No, I'm standing in Britain. I don't support the monarchy. I don't like King Charles.
No, you cannot say, no.
I just said it.
Mehdi,
I literally just said it.
you cannot take any action to oppose the monarchy system.
But I don't have to sign a pledge saying I support King Charles.
Well, each country is different.
Yeah,
we are talking about China.
China is very different.
And China has one policy which is part of the constitution.
Which involves threatening people in Taiwan who don't want to be part of your country. Let's bring in our panel who are waiting to come in and join. Let's see what they think. I'm joined by Stephen Chan, professor at the University of London School of Oriental by 3 London.
Thank you for having me.
China has upped its military spending. It's expanding its nuclear arsenal. It now has the biggest navy in the world. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that the country's military should be capable of, quote, fighting and winning wars, and told the military to focus all your energy on fighting, improve your capability to win. Victor, who do you want to fight and who do you want to win against?
First of all, the Chinese military spending is the second largest in the world, but it is only a fraction of that of the United States. And China has a very difficult geopolitical situation. China has 14 land neighboring countries altogether and 6 maritime nations for China. Therefore, China's defensive in nature, is not for fighting anyone except those who want to invade China or to launch a war against China. China's military spending is for peace rather than war, and war will be forced upon China, and China need to fight back.
You say it's for peace, but your neighbors don't agree. Your neighbors are pretty worried about you. You go through the list. Japan has sounded the alarm, saying your military buildup is very serious concern to them. India is worried about China on its border. And the Philippines president has warned that China is becoming a more pronounced and worrisome threat, he says. Those are the elected governments of countries representing over 1.6 billion people in Asia. This is not the United States. This is not the West. These are your Asian neighbors saying, we're worried about China.
Maybe you mentioned 3 of the neighboring countries of China. Let's talk about each of them very quickly. Japan unconditionally surrendered not only to the United States, but also to China in 1945.
I remember this.
If you read very carefully the unconditional surrender document that Japan signed, then you will know how Japan needs to conduct its foreign affairs as well as its military troops with China and with all those countries that Japan unconditionally surrendered for. India is a great nation, and there is a territorial dispute between China and India, but that dispute was not created by China, neither was it created by India. It was created or left behind by the British Indian government.
I don't know what point he's trying to make here. I'm kind of waiting to see.
China, in 2024, the defense spending is going up by 7%, the most for 5 years. You've had 29 consecutive years of military expenditure growth, the most of any country in the world. Since 2022, China has increased military drills around Taiwan. It's escalated since the new Taiwanese president was inaugurated in May. China is not a fan of him.
It's just CCP can do no wrong. Yeah. It's kind of difficult to fearmonger as much about China right now in the current dynamic when America is doing just about as much as it can to maximize harm in its own context. I guess I'm thinking mostly of, like, can you imagine any representative of the American Department of State defending itself against an intelligent journalist, like a foreign journalist? Can you imagine somebody from the State Department being interviewed by, like, a Chinese investigative journalist and being grilled on our behavior? I feel like we would look pretty awful, you know? It's just, I guess it's like China represents a massive threat primarily to Taiwan, but we've kind of lost a lot of legitimacy in our concerns about them, if that makes any sense, you know? Like, it's more difficult for us to juxtapose ourselves against them and offer a better solution, you know? Do you think it's mostly fear-mongering? Oh no, China's a fascist state that absolutely wants to invade Taiwan. 100%. It's not fear-mongering. That is definitely true. So, yeah.
Since then, there's been almost daily activity involving China's warships, drones, cyber attacks against Taiwan. China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, isn't it?
There is only one China. Taiwan is part of China, and the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate government for the totality of China. The exact status between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait is the unfinished civil war back in 1949. So ever since the beginning of the 1980s, China does not want to use a war to solve this unification problem.
You don't want to use a war, but you're surrounding it with ships, drones, cyber attacks, and making lots of threats.
Each time when the separatists in Taiwan want to push the edge of the envelope, they will come across more and more demonstration of the commitment of the Chinese nation.
Is fascist an accurate descriptor for China's authoritarianism? Now it is. Under Xi Jinping, yeah, 100%. I don't think it would have been under like Deng or whatever, but nowadays, yeah. The rhetoric from the CCP is like unambiguously fascist. Like, we hearken to our national heritage of strength and unity. We need like strong men on the front lines to defend the glory of the Chinese people and expand our land. An expansionist ideology, highly militaristic, highly like chauvinistic. Yeah, a lot of like ethno-nationalist appeals. A lot of the attacks on the Uyghur Muslims were framed from the Han supremacist dynamic, which has been the case for a lot of non-Han Chinese. They've definitely leaned more into that.
Eventually achieve peaceful reunification or otherwise. That's the litmus test.
Your defense minister said anyone who dares to pursue independence for Taiwan will be crushed into pieces and face destruction. Sounds like a truly peaceful guy.
That's a real statement, because if the separatists really want to push the edge of the envelope with the aid of some big country, for example, which wants to use Taiwan as a proxy in its own geopolitical rivalry against China, then wait until you see what will happen. Reunification will be achieved, and China is the only permanent member of the United Nations Security Council which has not yet achieved a complete reunification.
I'm always amused with this phrase reunification, because if it's one China, then clearly it's not one China. Clearly you're accepting by definition if you need to reunify it. They are doing their own thing. And why this obsession with Taiwan?
I'm gonna do my own thing.
Are a country of 3.7 million square miles, a population 60 times that of Taiwan, economy 20 times the size of Taiwan. Right. Why are you obsessed with Taiwan? Why not just leave them be?
In terms of defending China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, any inch of land is not 1 inch too much. Any one single person is not one person too many. So we need to achieve reunification.
Even though they don't want to be part of your country. 12% of the people of Taiwan say they want to reunify with China. 12%. You can't get more unpopular than that in that.
Mehdi, it's not up to the people in Taiwan to decide about the one China policy.
You're very blunt in your disregard for people's views, freedoms, dignity. You say you don't care about what they think. You also said in an interview with the French newspaper Le Monde, once we get the island back, we'll have to ask everyone's origin.
At least that's the honest answer. It is. I mean, it's an authoritarian state, right? Like, that is the honest answer. You know, it's not like it's not a democracy. So, I mean, it's consistent.
Those who have Japanese ancestry, who you basically say constitute 10% of the population, will have to pledge loyalty to reunification in writing.
Does China even pretend to be democratic internally? Yes, it does. There are elections, just the CCP chooses the candidates you can vote for. Yes, there is a pretense of democracy. Democracy is usually used by authoritarians as a way of lending legitimacy to the regime. That's why Assad holds elections. That's why you know, Maduro holds elections, not, of course, because there's a real choice, but because you can fake the results or skew the results, and it's like, oh, 99.9% of people support Assad, you know?
Otherwise, we'll have to help them leave.
Does Russia also?
You're
Yeah,
basically
Russia
calling for the ethnic cleansing of 2.3 million people in Taiwan.
No, you remember back in 1945 when Japan unconditionally surrendered, a lot of people in Taiwan who originally...
On the local level, are they more or less democratic than Russia? Man, it's really complicated. I think that Russia is in some ways more democratic than China is, but China's government is much more representative of the public interest than Russia's is, if that makes any sense. There are some elements of the Russian government where they kind of do have it up in the air as like a more or less functioning democracy. Not all of it, not the important parts, but some of it. Whereas in China, from the top down, you have a pretty rigorous and cemented system. But the CCP is a lot more interested in running China effectively than the Kremlin is in running Russia effectively. Like, under Putin, Russia has remained effectively like a petrostate backwater where the vast majority of the country is just left to rot, so the oligarchs can continue to, increase their wealth at the expense of the people. Whereas in China, obviously the oligarchs have tons of power, but there is a real effort to implement policies that expand the Chinese middle class and build them up. Not defending the CCP, but they're definitely more effective managers of state than the Kremlin is. Why don't people protest in huge droves in China? Because they're happy. China was suffering from a massive famine like 50 years ago, within the lifetime of a lot of older people in China. Like, if you're young in China, your parents were probably born in an era where your survival was not guaranteed at all. The Chinese Communist Party in one lifetime has elevated China from a backwater, rural, agrarian state where people were literally surviving off the crops they grew to one of the most booming economies in the world. And that has earned them a lot of leeway when it comes to some of the... Yeah, Mao set the bar in the floor. Yes, there are younger Chinese who are dissatisfied with the government, sure, because they weren't around for the famine. Eventually, there will be mass unrest, 100%. But I'm telling you why right now there isn't.
Originally came from...
In China, you live in a modern house. Yeah, it's for a lot of Chinese families, not like a tiny portion of them, a lot of them. Your parents grew up in a like thatch hut next to a farm, and you grew up in a modern house with indoor plumbing in Beijing. Literally, like your parents are telling you, like, the CCP brought me out of a mud hut in the countryside, and now we live here. Like, it's remarkable. It is an economic miracle. There's no denying that.
Japan, they were the rulers of Taiwan at the time. They stayed behind because of the magnanimity of the Chinese nation. Now, several decades later, they account for about 10% of the local population in Taiwan. Now, if you really do your homework, you will realize that those die-hard Taiwanese separatists include many of these Japanese
baseless
Chinese.
But okay.
Well,
but you would get rid of them. You would get rid of 2.3 million people.
No, after the reunification, everyone in Taiwan needs to...
If only China wasn't hijacked by a fascist like Xi. I don't think Xi is ideologically fascist. I think that fascism, as I've said many times, I'm not the one to invent the phrase, is capitalism in decay. And there are internal contradictions in Chinese, in the economy, in their culture, in their government, that are getting increasingly difficult to resolve through the Dengist liberal model of constant growth and expansion and investment. So how do you deal with a population in crisis, an economy in crisis, when your traditional way of dealing with it doesn't work anymore? Well, you start talking about the nation. You start talking about the homeland, right? That's kind of, it's a known strategy.
Make a pledge, whether they acknowledge there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China.
And if they don't make that pledge, they're out.
Those who pledge for the one China policy, they are local
By the way, you didn't say everyone. You said of Japanese descent. That is literally ethnic cleansing. You're picking people by their ethnic heritage, making them do a loyalty test. Otherwise, they have to get out of the country they've lived in for decades.
It is not a loyalty test. Here, for example, in Britain, if you are a British citizen...
Here we go, and this is where we started. I need to pee real quick. I'm interested in this. Who was the person who suggested this? I'm interested in this. I like this. We're expanding our purview a bit from the American electoral cycle. Why don't these situations ever lead to voluntary democratic reforms? Because authoritarian governments never give up power. Or at least they almost never do. It's just not how it works. This is another material condition thing. You can ideologically be as well intentioned as you want, but you know, the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy. The state is an institution that accumulates and does not give up power. There's just no getting around it, you know? You got to be careful. The nation states, folks. Didn't he warn you? We keep falling down the stairs. Didn't Marx warn you? What did I tell you about nation states, dog? What did I tell you? It keeps happening. Guess who pretended to want water, but actually didn't? Yeah? Wub, 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 wub. Wub, wub, wub.
You need to support the monarchy. You cannot say,
No, I'm standing in Britain. I don't support the monarchy. I don't like King Charles.
No, you cannot say, no.
I just said it.
Mehdi,
I literally just said it.
you cannot take any action to oppose the monarchy system.
But I don't have to sign a pledge saying I support King Charles.
Well, each country is different.
Yeah,
we are talking
I can
about
assure you,
China.
China is very different.
And China has one policy which is part of the
Which
Constitution.
involves threatening people in Taiwan who don't want to be part of your country. Let's bring in our panel who are waiting to come in and join. Let's see what they think. I'm joined by Stephen Chan, professor at the University of London School.
I do think it's very funny that he was trying to equate that the fact that in China you can't speak against the Chinese government, whereas in Britain you can't, like, I don't know, firebomb the royal palace.
Oriental and African studies. If you're in Taiwan today, how worried are you about a looming invasion?
I'm not in Taiwan today. I'm going to be visiting next year. I've been there 5 times in all of the great cities of Taiwan. And what I've noticed most conspicuously is that nobody I've talked to wants to rejoin or reunify with China because of their sense of freedom and their sense of self-determination. So I think that if you're going to say our sovereignty matters more than your desire for your own self-determination and freedom, then you're doing something that will not make you popular in Taiwan.
I warned you about those stairs, bro. Man, don't forget about Hong Kong. Remember, everyone was united in the whole, like, Save Hong Kong protests, and then China beat them down anyway, broke the agreements that were made. When Hong Kong reunified, a bunch of Hong Kong resistance leaders disappeared, and the whole movement got suppressed.
You won't win the argument for Chinese sovereignty over the island.
Martin Jakes is here with us, author of the best-selling book, When China Rules the World. Martin, you've said in the past that China should not be seen through a solely Western lens. So, I agree with you, and there's issues there. But I began the show by asking Victor about Japan and India and the Philippines, separate to Taiwan, just the issues in the region. Do you think China is...
Is there a clear reason for why it seems like politics in the U.S. are so reactionary empty? I'm really sorry. I have to hit it with you, and I'm really sorry for this one. It's because we're a democracy. Representatives of authoritarian countries can be more straightforward because they're not constantly trying to thread the needle of the 1,000 different, like, low IQ talking points that their party reps to try to win over the voter base for their constant marginal 51% over 49% election victories. You see this difference all over the place. I'm not saying fascist nations have, like, intelligent governments or intelligent reps. China does, but not, like, generally. I'm saying that the reason why we're like this is because everyone, including the Department of State, is constantly hampered by the fact that you need to balance your actual position and what's electorally viable, which are very rarely actually the same thing. Whereas in China, he can just say it, man. I mean, he just openly said that he would support effectively, like, ethnic cleansing, subservience of the Taiwanese people, and forcing them all to submit to loyalty to the CCP. And he can just say that. It's not a democracy. He can just say that, you know?
Responsible for some of those issues, all of those issues, none of those issues?
Well, China's obviously involved inevitably in all of those issues. I think that actually, if you look at the rise of China over the last 30, 40 years, spectacular, biggest change we've ever seen in history, really. And inevitably, that is changing everything in the region, in the world. That doesn't, but the remarkable thing I'd say, Mehdi, about China's rise is how, you quoted the military figures and so on, but China has not fought any wars since 1979. If you compare that with America, Europe, Japan, at the same stage of development, they were extremely aggressive.
Let's talk human rights, Victor. You've called Uyghurs in China's Xinjiang province your brothers and sisters. How do you feel about the fact that at least 500,000, some say more, of your brothers and sisters are being detained in camps by the Chinese government? That's 5% of the...
Does Xi have any actual opposition in the CCP? I'm sure that he does, but if there is, they keep quiet about it. Xi is very... they have very much consolidated power within him. You know, like he does not have like a tenuous hold. I would say that Xi Jinping has a much stronger hold than Putin does in terms of like holding over the government. This is an old interview. It was posted 3 weeks ago, but it does look like it's old. When was this recorded? No, it's not? Okay.
Adult Uyghur population, one of the highest imprisonment detention rates in the world.
Mehdi, the Uyghurs are a proud ethnic group, one of the 56 ethnic nationalities in China. The Uyghurs, as far as I'm concerned, are my true brothers and sisters. I know many of them. I travel to Xinjiang regularly, and I talk to many of the Uyghurs. Now, if anyone is serious about accusing China of practicing mass injustice to the Uyghurs, give me the evidence. I think
Human Rights Watch say 500,000 people detained over the years in recent years.
You keep quote Human Rights Watch, and I tell you...
Do you know where they got those numbers from?
I don't know.
Can I tell you?
I don't know.
I thought you were the expert on... You've been to Xinjiang, you've spoken to Uyghurs, you've never heard these numbers?
This is one of the things that I really like about Mehdi Hasan, in addition to the fact that he's a phenomenal interviewer, is that he's ideologically consistent. He calls out right-wing talking points in the West, he calls it out from China, you know? Rare to see that from, like, the online left.
Do not know where did they get the source.
So their source
Not
is
to say he's the online left, but you know what I mean.
Which has published its own statistics, Xinjiang official body, which says it's convicted 540,826 people prosecuted in the region since 2017. The United Nations Office for Human Rights looked at satellite footage. They say 10 to 20% of the population. Amnesty estimates 1 million people in camps. 500,000 is a conservative number.
Mehdi, if you quote that organization, please be assured that that organization has been completely discredited for the false information they came up with.
I love this game we're playing. You give me a source, I give you a source. They're discredited. They've said falsehoods.
Mehdi,
how can
it sure is convenient for China that they don't allow people to investigate this themselves. Like, there's no confusion about how many Americans are incarcerated, right? Our system is totally open. Journalists can, like, through FOIA or through literally just going and asking, or like our records, we're not hiding that. I mean, sure, individually you get some cases where people hide shit. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm just saying that, like, on a nationwide level, it's fairly publicly accessible, the information. Whereas in China, like, they were fully doing a 1984 in the Xinjiang province and were trying to deny it was happening at all. And then there were, like, leaked records and, like, instructions where they had citizen watchers in the Xinjiang province where Han Chinese were, like, incarcerating people or marking them for incarceration if they had a beard or whatever. It's just, like, it's crazy, crazy shit.
Let me ask you a question. How many people are in detention in Xinjiang? You give me a number.
Listen, if you look at Xinjiang...
You give me a number.
If you look at... I do not have the number.
Why not?
Yeah.
Hold on. You can't say it's not 500,000 and then say you don't have a number. I have a number. I have sources. How many people do you think are detained?
Let me give you my reason.
No.
I go to Xinjiang a lot. I traveled almost
So they're your brothers and sisters.
Xinjiang.
You go there a lot, but you can't tell me how many people are in detention.
Listen, they are happier. They enjoy their life. They enjoy their Muslim...
They banned crematoriums from reporting their electricity usage after they lifted the zero COVID policy. Well, that's... Is that true? China crematorium ban electricity report. I would love to see an article on that, because that is very wild. We know that they've hid the number of deaths. That's just such a specific way. Number of cremations in the wealthy coastal region of Xinjiang jumped 73%. Sheesh.
Practices and traditions. Listen.
How many people are in detention, Victor?
Mehdi, let me be philosophical.
No, don't be philosophical. Be numerical.
No.
How many people are in detention? You said no to 500,000. How about, okay, let's let 250,000.
Let me finish my point.
Nope.
If
you answer the question. You can't filibuster, Victor, on the show.
If anyone
how many people do you
Xinjiang
think
independence, they will be dealt with in
Got it.
court.
How many of them are in court and how many in detention?
A very small minority.
So you don't have a number. You say they're all happy, but you won't let in independent investigators. You won't let in journalists to go there.
Why not?
They're not allowed to go there.
I will be happy to escort you to Xinjiang.
Really?
Escort. Oh, here we go. China withholds key indicator of COVID death toll as it fails to release crematorium data. God damn, that is so grim, man.
I can make that promise.
Really?
I will speak to the Chinese government.
Here's the problem.
To the Chinese embassy.
I don't want to escort. I don't want minders. I want to go freely. Will you allow that?
Well... When the Westoid hits you with a take so democratic, you just have to hit him with the CCP stare. Oh my God.
I do not make that decision.
Oh, a moment ago you were going to make all sorts of interruptions. Suddenly I said, let me go freely and speak to Uyghurs freely. Can I do that with no minders?
I'll be happy.
No Chinese government escort.
I will be happy to make your case.
Oh, just now you said you'd organize it, now we're back. Make a case. You can't guarantee. Rehan Assad is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, international human rights lawyer. You are a Uyghur who Victor says, brothers and sisters. Your literal brother has been held in an internment camp in Xinjiang since 2016, I believe. Rehan, tell us what happened to your brother and what is your response to Victor, to what you've heard? And what is the latest on your brother, if you don't mind sharing with us?
By the way, I will say I genuinely think that international pressure did abate the genocide of the Uyghur Muslim people. I genuinely think that the plan from the Chinese government was they were just going to mill all of them through a factory. Like literally just like, you will disappear or you will conform, you will convert, you will do something. But they had to dial it way back. It's still going on, even though it's lightened substantially. Very substantially. But yeah, no, they were doing a regional grind. Hello, the Radical Dino. Welcome to the party. But yeah, no, I really do think that international pressure changed that. You know, we have an interlocking global economy, and China gets away with a lot, but obviously, you know, maybe they ran the numbers and they decided it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah, my brother Akbar Assad is a prominent tech entrepreneur. In fact, your own media outlet called him a bright star in the tech world. Right before his detention, he was invited on a state gala dinner, and then he disappeared. How could you explain that?
Mehdi, again, in China, we have about 20 Muslim...
Your brother was enemy of state. Sorry.
Ethnic groups. You need to ask one question. Why the extremism existed mostly among the Uyghur communities? Because Muslim ethnic groups. You need to ask one question. Why the extremism existed mostly among the Uyghur communities? Because there are extremists among the Uyghur community who want to separate Xinjiang away from China.
Has your brother been convicted of any crime?
Supported by CIA and other Western organization.
Okay. Rehan,
that's the real truth.
Hold on.
To the Kazakhs, they don't support.
Has your brother been convicted of a crime?
According to UN, there's no trial has taken place. He just forcibly disappeared. Actually, it amounts to enforced disappearance. But according to the Chinese government, he committed a crime of inciting ethnic discrimination while he's systematically oppressed. And when I challenged that decision, because under the Chinese law, if you're committed with the alleged crime, that you have 3 years sentence, but he got 15 years. How do you justify that?
Your
then
brother challenged the mandate of heaven.
So how do you even explain this is a rule of law system? You mentioned that if people are not pro-independent, then they're fine in Xinjiang. My brother by no means is pro-independent. In fact, your media outlet, sees daily media, invited him to exchange information. Did he split the country when he visited Beijing? Are
you okay with the treatment of her brother?
In front of this very august body, let me make several very brief points. The real crime involved by some of the Uyghur people
Why did this guy agree to do this? Honestly, the real reason is because it works. There are a lot of Americans on both the right and the left who are varying levels of accepting of China's authoritarianism. It's the same reason that you get like wedge Americans who are pro-Venezuela or pro-Assad or whatever. It's not enough to like sway an election or anything like that. It's more in line of like it is easier for China to legitimize themselves if they keep putting out feelers for an adjacent culture war issue that they can grab attention on. So with Muslims, with the Uyghur Muslims, I genuinely think there was a hope from the CCP that they could go like, hey, America, you know, it's like radical jihadists, you know, we've been there, you know, come on. It didn't work out, but I genuinely think there was, because their rhetoric mirrored it. Their rhetoric was like war on terror rhetoric, where they talked about like we need security in order to preserve our freedoms or whatever. You know, these Muslims are getting radical. I think they were trying to leverage that to an extent, and I think they do that with the isolationist bit as well, right? Where they talk about you know, America's always involved in wars, which we are. China is not, comparatively. That is true compared to America, of course, even though they are very, you know, very militaristic. I think that there's a hope that the CCP can eventually lock in with a sympathetic narrative. I think you're a little American brain on this. I am an American. I am an American. I mean, look at what Russia's doing. Russia is constantly putting out feelers to try to appeal to the American right wing. Just a week ago, they said that if you oppose Western wokeness, they'll expedite your immigration process to Russia. Authoritarian countries like putting out those feelers, you know? Germany did the exact same thing. Nazi Germany, I mean.
Are agitating for Xinjiang independence. They violate the one China policy. Now, separate from that, you know, different communities may find their own different problems which need to be sorted out in the course of law. And I hope...
But our brother's been detained for 8 years.
Well, I do not know the
years.
charge. I hope I can help you to really look at the case, at the accusation against him.
Yeah,
I
one
hope
last
your
comment.
brother is not guilty of inciting for separatism of Xinjiang.
Briefly.
If that is the case, then let the law take its course.
Inciting separatism for the Xinjiang province. Why do I feel like the definition for that might be a little bit broad on the CCP's end? You know?
Your media outlet called him a model citizen who is a promoter of ethnic unity in Xinjiang.
Have you been able to speak to your brother or see him?
No, not at all. Like, you know, for 8 years, he's forcibly disappeared. Up until like last month,
I mean,
for the first
8 years in detention or an eternity of disfavor from the Forbidden Palace, never getting to taste the fruits of heaven. I mean, you know, when you compare it, when you weigh the cost-benefit analysis for opposing the Dragon Emperor.
First time my parents saw him, what kind of justice system is that? You're making a mockery
You're not
of the
just
rule of
detaining
law.
them, Victor. They're being tortured. Numerous testimonies the UN has collected. Are you okay with that?
Mehdi, when you talk about torture, think about Guantanamo Bay prisons.
Oh, my word.
I mean, it is, the Xinjiang province literally is doing Gitmo shit, but larger. It's literally, like, it's multiple times larger. Like, Guantanamo Bay is a single camp. The Xinjiang province is a province. It's a whole... Whataboutism? Yeah, I mean, the Guantanamo Bay is barely even... How many hundreds of people are there now? How many millions of Uyghur Muslims have been subjected to increased surveillance or have been put through those camps?
Than in Xinjiang. Xinjiang is a place of great peace and stability.
The accounts,
Xinjiang
hold on,
as a
Victor, the
separate
accounts of
country.
detainees include being beaten with batons, electric batons, while strapped in a so-called tiger chair. 158, being subjected to...
Tiger chair. It's so Chinese, dude. It's so... Can you imagine if in Gitmo it was like, yeah, we have them strapped to an eagle chair or like one of those Broncos you have at bars in Texas, you know?
interrogation with water poured on their faces, prolonged solitary confinement, forced to sit motionless on stools for long periods. This, you're okay with this? This is the proud China?
Probably you are reading the case in Iraq committed by the Americans.
What about? Hey, our like authoritarian nation of 1.4 billion doing ethnic cleansing of millions of Uyghur Muslims. Well, did you know that Gitmo, which has like, I don't know, 5 people in it now, still exists? Do you remember what you did 20 years ago in Iraq?
Reading the UN report in August 2022 from detainees who came out of camps in Xinjiang. Your brothers and sisters, but these brothers and sisters you don't seem to give a damn about. How do you know any torture happened in Iraq out of interest?
I know.
How?
I know for sure.
How?
I talked to the Iraqi ambassador in Beijing.
Okay.
He wept in front of me.
And I'm sure Rehan's parents have wept, and you don't seem to care.
And I hope you will tell your brother, be a staunch supporter of one China policy, be a proud
I cannot
Chinese
tell him he's
Uyghur.
in prison.
Dude, literally, it's like, my brother has been beaten for 40 years, and he's like, and if your brother is ready to accept the one China policy and bow. Dude.
You can't tell him because she can't speak to him because you deny access, Victor.
China.
Victor, she can't speak to him. Are you going to arrange it? Are you going to arrange a visit now?
I'll be happy to help you to make a phone call.
There's a lot of promises being made here, guys. You should follow up on this afterwards.
You are all witnesses.
We are witnesses, indeed. Let me bring in Martin Jakes. Martin, when you hear people say, basically, there's no torture, everyone's making it up, there's nobody in detention, come on, that's ridiculous, is it not, Martin?
Well, I mean...
China literally sent Uyghurs to Gitmo by telling the U.S. they were Al-Qaeda members. Is that true? China, Gitmo, Al-Qaeda... When China convinced the U.S. that Uyghurs were waging jihad, Washington fell for Beijing's ruse that embattled Muslim minority posed a threat to the West. I didn't even know about this when I said that they're trying to appeal to American Islamophobic rhetoric. When was that? The article's written in 2019. So this was like after 9/11. Oh, God, the attempt to cleanse the Uyghur Muslims has been going on for a while. It's not like the most recent effort is the most recent effort, you know, but
I don't know all the details of the situation in Xinjiang, but clearly there's been a big problem.
Guy getting really like confused at Gitmo because the like detainee he's torturing keeps swearing in Mandarin. It's like, what?
For a long time in Xinjiang, in terms of the relationship between the Uyghur and the Han, and that came to a head in 2009 when there was a demonstration and 200 people were killed by the Uyghur, and then the Chinese inflicted the same kind of damage on the Han. So this is a deep problem in my view, and it's not easily passed off. There's no other problem in China of this kind.
Yeah.
But
a lot of people consider
this is a big problem.
That's a pretty big problem.
It's a very big problem for them, yeah. But the other thing, Betty, I'd say, is that the point that's being made about separatism is true. That I think that the 30 million Muslims in China, the Hui is the biggest single minority. Yeah. They are completely integrated. But the problem in Xinjiang is clearly the issue of separatism.
Stephen, let me ask you this question.
This guy's an apologist for China.
Victor's making a lot of promises tonight about me going to Xinjiang and Rehan going to Xinjiang and everyone's going to be fine. How safe, how okay are you with visiting China? How free do you think you are when you go to China?
When I go to China, and I haven't been for some time, I'm watched almost 24/7. There's always someone I can spot is trailing me. So I know when my hotel room is upgraded suddenly to a spacious suite, I'm now in a place which is bugged. So someone who's a mild critic and a scholarly critic like me doesn't feel safe in China. And by contrast, I feel safer in Taiwan.
Victor, when you hear Stephen say he doesn't feel that safe going to China, prefers going to Taiwan, when we talk about freedom of speech,
I don't
for example,
think he cares, man.
In China. I live in the United States of America, where I can say that Donald Trump is I don't know, hypothetically, an orange-faced narcissist. I also live here in the UK, I'm British. Here you have Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister, was called a pint-sized loser by a Labour politician. No one in China has that kind of freedom to talk about their government, to talk about President Xi Jinping in that way. You can't say anything like that. You wouldn't dare say anything like that because you know what will happen to you when you go home. You know what will happen to your family. That's what China is.
Mehdi, if you do anything, write anything, email or chat to your friends about taking anything action against, let's say, Prime Minister of Britain, President of the United States,
I didn't say that.
You'll be
See, to him, speaking against Xi Jinping and acting against the government in an illegal way are the same thing. You actually can, by the way, talk about taking action against the U.S. government. You can protest against it. You're allowed to do that in this country. But to him, it is literally like any speaking against the leader is tantamount to treason, effectively.
With
That's
very
what I said.
swiftly.
Victor, you're a master of straw man. That's not what I said.
I
said Rishi Sunak was called a pint-sized loser. Would you call Xi Jinping a pint-sized loser?
Mehdi, each country has different sensitivities. In UK,
so you're admitting you can't criticize the Chinese government?
No. You can criticize the government if you are positive in your attitude.
You can criticize.
You can criticize. That's incredible.
The government if you're positive.
Yes.
Is that the new philosophy?
No, if you can come up with your.
You've got to come up with nice insults.
No,
you can't. No. Yeah, no, he's 100% lying here. You can't criticize the government. What you can say is like, Xi Jinping has done wonderfully for the middle class, and I look forward to seeing him expand on that in the future, you know? Like, that's like the level of, you know, so much good has been done for the Chinese people, and it is my hope that even more good will come from our leaders, you know? Like, that's, you can't, yeah, there's no, like, you can't criticize the Chinese government, not really. I mean, you can criticize them and get away with it, but only if they decide you're not worth their time, right? Like, I'm not saying that it's like a full-on totalitarian, you're in the backwater and somebody bugged your car and you get arrested that day, but if they want to go after you, they will.
Constructive advice.
For example,
I'm loving this.
Dealing with the aging population, what should be the government do? What should this governor do?
But you can't say the president's lied. He's a liar.
Nothing will be dealt with very swiftly.
It is a little bit refreshing to get like the mask off response. You know what I mean? It is. It genuinely is. You couldn't get this out of a Russian diplomat. A Russian diplomat would be like, well, in Russia, you can criticize wokeness. You can criticize wokeness. You know, like it would just be like culture war pandering. But this guy is like, no, of course you can't insult the Dragon Emperor. What are you, fucking stupid? He keeps within his immortal loom the ties of life that bind all Chinese citizens to the material plane. What are you, a moron? You will bring the heavens' wrath down upon you and all of us. Of course we must not allow criticism. Do you want your crops to grow?
In China. You cannot say that.
That is the most honest thing you've said tonight. Yes. Victor Gao, we're going to take a break. That's part one of Head-to-Head with our guest, Victor Gao. In part two, we'll be talking about President Xi Jinping. We'll be talking about the issue of dictatorship, and we'll hear from our very patient audience here in London's Conway Hall.
This is great. This is fantastic, man. This is great. I'm having a blast here. This is like a nice reminder, like no matter how bad things get over here in America, there are some things that I'm very happy for, you know?
Welcome back to Head on Al Jazeera English. My guest this week is Victor Gao, former interpreter to the late Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, vice president of the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing, and an ardent promoter of the People's Republic. We're also
so we can positively criticize you? No.
Joined by an expert panel here in London's Conway Hall and a live audience who we're going to hear from shortly. Victor, before we get to the audience, in 2019, on this very show, I asked the question, is Xi Jinping gearing up to be president for life, dictator-in-chief? I mean, he's the most powerful leader of China since Mao. He's abolished presidential term limits. He's now in his third five-year term as president. So I'll ask again tonight, is he now president for life?
Yeah, we went over this back when the Uyghur Muslim genocide was more prescient. But yeah, in like internal Chinese documentation, which if I remember correctly, the CCP didn't even deny, they list in Article 9 here, expressions of extremification, like what to look for in the Xinjiang province to indicate Uyghur Muslim extremism. advocating or spreading extremist thinking, interfering with others' freedom of religion, interfering with activities such as others' weddings or funerals or inheritance, interfering with others having communication, generalizing the concept of halal to make halal expand into other areas beyond halal foods, interfering with cultural recreational activities, rejecting or refusing public goods and services such as radio and television. Huh? Rejecting or refusing public goods and services such as radio and television. You know, in 1984, you weren't allowed to remove your telescreen. Wearing or compelling others to wear burqas with face coverings or to bear symbols of extremification. Spreading religious fanaticism through irregular beards or name selection. Your beard would not survive. Mine might be okay. Maybe.
True dictator.
For the record, first of all, Chinese President Xi Jinping will never be president for life. There will be a time limit. When it will be handled according to the Chinese legal system and constitution. Secondly, there is no dictator in China. Why? Because dictatorship simply doesn't work. Democracy means modernization. And how can you explain profound transformation of China over the past 45 years in China if you have dictatorship or authoritarian rule? No. Every leader in China will be put into a team, and teamwork will be much more important than individualism.
Victor. Maybe previous
the CCP puts a lot of effort into maintaining the facade of a democracy. They refer to themselves as a democracy. No one refers to themselves as an authoritarian government.
Presidents did. Maybe Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao. Everyone knows Xi Jinping has centralized power, consolidated power, got rid of term limits. You say there's a way to get rid of him, but there isn't actually a legal way to get rid of him. He's in power for life, and he likes being a dictator. Why are we pretending?
Mehdi, allow me to remind you, the Communist Party of China, which is the ruling party of China, has a membership of up to 100 million people.
Yeah.
It's well structured. Every province, every state-owned enterprise, etc., will have a party cell.
There's no division or debate within the Chinese Communist Party.
Listen to me. No single person in China can dictate to a population of 1.4 billion people and 100 million membership of the Communist Party of China.
Okay,
so I guess the argument here is he can't be a dictator because there are a lot of people in China. Like Caesar couldn't have possibly been an authoritarian because Rome was so big, you know?
That's a mission impossible.
Let's test that proposition. The president won a vote last year. Won a vote. I'll put that in air quotes. Do you know the tally of last year's presidential vote in favor of Xi Jinping by the National People's Congress, part of that structure you just advertised to us? What was the vote? Can you tell our audience here?
I think it's up to about 100%. That doesn't...
2,952 to 0.
Yes, that's exactly what I said.
Could you not find a few people just to make it look a little even? One or two?
Mehdi, it's not surprising. It's not surprising.
2,952 to 0.
It's not surprising. I mean, one side is the Dragon Emperor and his, consort of chosen representatives. What fool would vote against that?
It's one-man rule, my friend.
In the Chinese system, everyone supports the Chinese president.
You just told us 10 seconds ago there's this huge system, a big party, one guy, and then you're like, oh no, but everyone supports him. 0 votes against him. One person out of 3,000 couldn't say, Xi Jinping, not my guy. One.
What if he is the guy for all the Communist Party of...
It was literally like, he can't be a dictator. No one man could control all of these people, all these different opinions. You hold up the sheet showing they all have the same opinion. Well, maybe he's just that good. What if he is that guy? What if he's him?
Of China. You never know.
Well, if that's the case, then your entire first answer is redundant, because it doesn't matter if there's 100 million people. No. They all have to follow the leader.
No, he does command huge respect among the Chinese people, as well as...
You say respect,
and from the heavens themselves.
Do you know how many names were on the ballot papers that were given in 2013? How many names were on the ballot paper when they went to choose the president? Can you tell our audience?
I think there is only one candidate.
Yeah.
But the people of China only want one. Why waste the Chinese people's time giving them the option of an inferior candidate?
No other names. That's a real secure leader. A guy who knows he has the confidence of his people. You get to vote, but only for me, and none of you can actually vote against me.
Mehdi, we do not want to end up in a situation with 6 prime ministers in 80 years.
Yeah. So you prefer a dictatorship?
No, we prefer a system that works for the benefit of the Chinese people.
I mean, this actually is the core of the back and forth argument, isn't it? Right? Authoritarianism does in some contexts beget stability, and democracy does in some contexts beget instability, and that is an absolute fact. And this is the honest argument in favor of Xi Jinping, right? You could say he's an authoritarian who's consolidated power and he wants to be president for life, but it's undeniable that China has been stable under that system, at least for now. At least for now. And that is an argument, right? Of course, the problem is he still has to pretend he's pro-democracy because that's like the selling point, you know?
I've not said a word about what works or not. You got great economic growth, but you're a dictatorship.
There is no dictatorship, Mehdi.
You just admitted that there's no name on the ballot paper, no votes against him, and they all just
Dictatorship is man over man. The rule of the Dragon Emperor is just nature. I'm sorry, I'll stop.
That's a dictatorship.
It is very funny, but I'll stop.
When you have
you can say my name multiple times, but it's a dictatorship.
How many candidates are there on the ballot paper?
I'm not going to stop.
How many? What? King and queen?
When the king succeeds the queen,
yes.
How many candidates are there on the ballot paper?
How many?
Does that make Britain not a democracy?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm a Republican, so I think we should be a full democracy and get rid of the monarchy. And I can say that here. You can't say that in China.
You cannot
good, very strong rebuttal right there.
Any action against that?
Yes, I can, actually. I can go out on the street, I can hold up a placard and say, let's get rid of King Charles. I can create a whole protest outside Buckingham Palace. You can't do that in China. You can't even put one other person's name on a ballot paper. That's how insecure your leader is.
Mehdi, I'm a lawyer. In my capacity as a lawyer, I can give you a long list of things that you cannot do regarding the monarchy here in Britain.
I'm not debating that.
And not on that list is criticizing or protesting against them. It would be in China.
Saying that we have an elected government, we get to choose, we get to swap 6 prime ministers, God help us, but we get to pick. Everyone in this room who's a citizen gets to pick.
Listen, you end up with your mini budget, which bankrupt the whole country.
But that's an honest answer, Victor. But Victor, I admire that because that's an honest answer. Your answer is, it's a dictatorship that works. At least say that.
No.
No, you can't. You keep dodging. One minute you say, it's not a dictatorship. Then I show you it is. You say, but it's working. We've got growth.
Mehdi,
pick one.
Mehdi, if that is your point, I will seriously urge you to do more homework about how the Chinese system works.
Okay, let's talk about the Chinese system, because I did a little bit of homework. Did you know that Xi Jinping put his name in the Constitution? That's weird.
Well,
the leader of the country put his own name in the Constitution while he's president. No one's done that since Mao. None of the other Chinese presidents, not Hu Jintao, not your old boss Deng Xiaoping, none of them did it. Did they? Or am I wrong?
It's wrong.
Who did it?
The Chinese constitution has been most frequently amended compared with any other country.
Am I wrong about what I just said with my little bit of homework?
Mao's name was put into the constitution.
That's what I said.
Deng's name was put into the constitution.
Not while he was president.
And Jiang Zemin's name was put into the constitution.
Not while they were sitting presidents, and you know that. Tell our crowd here, not while they were president. They didn't do it themselves.
According to my recollection, each of these names were put into the constitution
not while they were sitting president.
While the leaders were still alive.
Okay. Still alive. Okay.
So I'm right. Not while they were president. I love the little slip. Even Donald Trump, one of the great narcissists of our time, has not proposed yet putting his name into the US Constitution. If you are the president of China, you're elected without any opponents, no names on the ballot paper, 0 votes against you, you put your name in the Constitution, 6-year-olds are taught about Xi Jinping thought in primary school. That is not just a dictatorship, that is a cult of personality.
I don't think China believes in personal
So why are 6-year-olds learning about Xi Jinping thought? I'm pretty sure no 6-year-olds learned about Liz Truss's mini budget. Victor,
the Chinese system is such that once you orient the country in one direction...
It's patriotic education, by the way. That's literally what they're talking about, right? Like the Republican effort, the 1776 Commission, that was thrown out in the last few days of the Trump administration. That's what they're talking about, patriotic education. Like the blatant use of public education as a tool to indoctrinate. As opposed to its current status in America, which is kind of like passive indoctrination. Like you learn about how communism fell and capitalism rules or whatever, but you don't have 6-year-olds all like saluting a framed picture of Joe Biden and then learning about Biden thought and how like the Inflation Reduction Act was the like bedrock of American democracy and so maybe we should. Maybe they were cooking something with that. Don't you have to do a pledge in school? Yeah, to the flag, not to the current ruling administration.
Everyone.
Which is still bad. I'm not defending that. I'm just saying there's obviously a difference. Also, you don't you can sit out the flag salute if you want to.
Follows the suit.
Do they follow or are they ordered to follow? They don't follow out of choice.
No, it's like a vehicle with 4 wheels. Here, you have 4 wheels aligned in different directions, opposing directions. In China, the 4 wheels of a car all lined up in one direction.
Well, they don't.
Going forward.
Well, that's an argument for dictatorship, right? The idea that democracy breeds division, whereas a dictatorship means that everyone's on the same page. That's like a classic argument for it.
Victor, let me give you an example. Former Foreign Minister Xinjiang was removed from his post and has not been seen in public since June 2023. A few months later, China's Defense Minister, General Li Shangfu, disappeared from public view for months, has now been expelled from the party, accused of corruption. That's at least 2 ministers that disappeared just in the last year. With apologies to Oscar Wilde, to lose 1 minister might be unfortunate. To lose 2 is careless, is it not?
Do you know the point I want to make? This means China is really merciless in dealing with corruption of all kinds, even among the highest.
Your foreign minister and defense minister. Imagine Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin just disappeared tomorrow. We don't know where they are. We've never seen them again. That's not normal, Victor.
It is true that something like this, like you get used to it when you hear about it in China, but if it happened in America, it'd be fucking insane. If like Antony Blinken criticized Joe Biden and then he just was not seen for 8 months after. Like it's one of those, over in wacky China, but then you think about it happening here and it's like, wait, hold on, that's actually insane. That's actually really weird.
Listen, corruption is rampant in China.
How do we know they're corrupt? They just disappeared. Where's the trial? Where's the trial, Victor?
Finish my point. Corruption of all kinds in China need to be dealt with.
So where's the trial?
Mercilessness.
So where's the trial? Where's the trial of the former foreign minister? We don't even know where he is.
Mehdi, those things you don't know doesn't mean...
Mehdi, this talk will get you sanctioned. You will be excommunicated. I'm sorry. It's at the level of like sanctimoniousness that you don't get from the disingenuous fascists. You know, you only get them from these like technocratic fascists. It's a technocratic fascism. It's almost like an oxymoron, but it's technocracy applied in defense of a fascist system. You know, it's the idiosyncrasy of fascism. They're always getting you with new combinations. I've heard every liberal jibber jabber speech, you know, but they're always hitting you with new ways of defending fascism.
Doesn't happen.
Where is the trial for this man you're just accusing of corruption?
Xinjiang was my good friend for more than 20 years.
Where is he then?
He is involved in corruption.
Where is he?
And he is dealt with very swiftly.
Where is he, Victor?
Regardless of...
He's your good friend.
Dude, he's just flat out not. He's just completely stonewalling it.
Where he is.
It's kind of terrifying a little bit if you think about it. Like if you look past how silly it is, it's actually a little bit horrifying. He's in the device.
Where is the former foreign minister of China?
Position.
This is not a hard question. We're not asking where Rehan's brother in the middle of Xinjiang is that you can dodge. Where is the former foreign minister of China who disappeared? And by the way, he wasn't accused of corruption. The spokesman came out and said he has health reasons. Then corruption came later, by the way. Where did he go, your friend?
That means there is a process. And the process
starts with one lie that he's ill.
Literally.
And the next lie is he's corrupt.
He may be ill. You never know.
I mean, he's probably ill after he's been in a Chinese prison.
He may be ill now.
Yeah.
You never know.
Exactly.
He's so mask off, dude. It's so dude, bring me oh man. This is why we're missing out. Can you imagine if Republican fascism was like this? And Donald Trump was just like a guy with little accountant glasses. And he would like answer journalist questions with this level of blatant like, yeah, if you disagree with me, I'll just have you disappeared. Oh my God, man.
But at least Xinjiang lost his job
Victor, where is he?
of his corruption.
Last question.
That's the point.
Where is he?
He's somewhere in China. You will never see him.
What the Jesus Christ. The audience, I think the audience was laughing at what Mehdi Hassan was saying.
You never know.
Exactly.
But at least
Where is he?
Xinjiang lost his job
Victor, where is
because
he?
of his corruption.
Last question.
That's the point.
Where is he?
He's somewhere in China. You will never see him.
They were laughing at the "he's somewhere in China," the "you will never see him" bit. That was mid-laugh. That's crazy, dude. It's just straight up villain shit. It's crazy. Oh my god.
He's among the 1.4
Insane.
billion people.
And no, it's not just him. There's many other people who have disappeared. The previous defense minister disappeared. The Ministry of Industry and Technology disappeared. The former Interpol president disappeared. In China, you just disappear if they don't like you. That's the rule of law in China.
I'm so happy they disappear, because if they keep doing their job, they will bring greater disasters.
Victor, be careful what you wish for, because everyone's watching this show.
Literally, I'm glad they were disappeared by the state, because otherwise they would keep doing the things that we accuse them of doing.
And if you get something wrong tonight, maybe you disappear.
If I disappear, I hope you will bail me out.
I'd have to find you first, and China is apparently a big country. I want to bring in Stephen Chan, professor at the University of London School of Oriental African Studies. Stephen, Xi Jinping's policies, his crackdown on dissidents. I mean, China was never a democracy. Other presidents were also dictatorial. But can we agree that Xi Jinping is on a different level when it comes to repression at home, the consolidation of power? I assume you disagree with Victor's description of him as part of a, I don't know, four-wheel car all driving in the same direction happily.
He certainly consolidated his power. He is a very, very strong president. And I think that the real test of all of this is how China has...
By the way, the fact that, like, China is able to do amazing, incredible things in terms of industrialization, and America can't do anything and our Congress is stalled, I genuinely don't think it's because of democracy. I think it's because of bourgeois democracy. The reason we're so split is because we have to deal with the constant avalanche of counter-propaganda from corporate sources, where it's literally like maybe 10 or 20 ultra-wealthy people representing a ton of firms and interests in businesses and conglomerates that invest in and incentivize and like lobby and so on, and like the anti-climate change lobby. China is the world's leader in solar energy technology. America decided not to give a shit about it because, like, you know, 4 oil companies in a trench coat single-handedly pulled the lever over and convinced half this country that climate change isn't real. You know, it's not necessarily an issue with democracy. It's democracy where the most powerful and influential people hate you and hate life, and are evil and devilish.
Has treated Hong Kong with the increasing clampdown on dissent and free expression of opinion when they were meant to have a degree of freedom and a one country, two system way of approaching life. We can't see any evidence of vibrant debate in China. And I'd note that one of the great disappointments of my life is when I read Chinese academic works, everyone toes a party line. No one does independent research to publish, as it were, anything critical of, for instance, not just Xi Jinping, anything critical about Chinese foreign policy.
Well, they might disappear.
They might not get promoted in any case.
Rehan Assad is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council International Human Rights Law. Rehan, in part one, we talked in depth about the repression against the Uyghurs and your own personal situation. In 2014, Xi Jinping privately called for an all-out struggle, quote, against terrorism and to show absolutely no mercy after a visit to Xinjiang. How much do you believe Xi Jinping is driving what's happening in Xinjiang? How much do you think he's responsible for the repression in China?
Well, the matter of the fact is that all of which happened under current administration. Right, so many scholars are attributing to him. It happened under his reign. He's the one who said absolutely no mercy, stamping out roots and branches of the Uyghurs.
Vosh says it's dumb for the United States to do manufacturing, praises China for doing the manufacturing of American technology and green energy. I don't fucking get it. Yeah, because there's a difference between desperately trying to bring back manufacturing jobs that are already being done in other factories in other parts of the world and us innovating and developing in a new sector. I don't necessarily have an issue with American manufacturing. I have an issue with trying to bring back like the 1940s, you know, the like desperate, pathetic, oh, we're going to bring the car industry back. You know, it's like you can get a new boom. And after we do lead the world in green energy development, maybe for a while that shit does end up getting shipped overseas. Like, it will happen eventually, you know? It's just like this pathetic obsession with reviving a nearly century-old style of economic growth when that's not how America's grown its wealth in such a long time, you know, not since the Rust Belt became the Rust Belt. That's the thing that I take issue with. But if we want to like build out and have a new boom in like you know, solar energy development or wind energy development or whatever, that's fine.
Breaking out their connection, and these are the policies implemented under his leadership. So it's very hard to separate Xi Jinping from the current policy, Xinjiang.
Martin Jakes, author of the best-selling book When China Rules the World. You heard Victor talk about, well, we can't be a dictator.
What's your take on the CHIPS Act? I think the CHIPS Act is a good thing. Having all chip production centralized in Taiwan, which is like being loomed over by China, is insane. Yeah, 100%. I'm fine. The CHIPS Act is good. Yeah. I specifically disagree with the obsession with like bringing back manufacturing in its old form just because that's what we imagine when we think of American prosperity. You know? That's dumb.
Dictatorship because we're doing so well, the economy is doing amazing, we don't have Liz Truss mini budgets, etc. But then you get into the debate about, can dictatorship and growth coexist? Do you need to have democracy to go alongside that? And I think about the pandemic, Martin, and I think about China's reaction to the pandemic. Is that where the dictatorship, the lack of transparency, the disappearances caught up with China? Because, of course, there was a black hole in China in terms of China's censorship methods, its draconian policies, the zero COVID policy, the crackdown, which led, some people say, to over 1 million, 2 million deaths. We saw protests in buildings, people screaming. Was that a moment where China actually collided with reality and said, this system, it can't survive long term?
Well, I beg to differ on the question of the pandemic, because actually for 2 years, 2020 and 2021, actually China did, under the circumstances, extremely well and well outperformed the West. And the reasons for it are quite complicated. You've got to take into account a very different kind of system. Now, one of the problems with the discussion, I think, so far on this question is that the country, it sounds as if the country doesn't work. If you say dictator, despot, all these kind of words.
I didn't say that, but
no,
that's how
but if, and you say, not you personally, but and one says there's no discussion. This is, I think this is absolutely untrue. So what we're presenting here is not an
This guy was a part of the British Communist Party and editor of Marxism Today. My students are all morons! Poor Marx.
Picture. We've got
it's not about accurate picture, it's about balance, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I don't deny what you're saying, but you're British. You would think it was a political earthquake if the Foreign Secretary and the Defense Secretary disappeared in the space of 6 months. Not arrested, disappeared, surely.
Yeah, and there is something on. Look, Qin was a friend of mine as well. And I don't know what's happened to him. And I think it is odd. Certainly to our eyes, it's weird.
To our eyes, right, to the Western eye, we might not be used to political officials just disappearing and then having accusations made against them after they've disappeared. And then former Chinese officials being interviewed by Mehdi Hassan and saying stuff like, you will never see them again. You know? That it's, you know, it's you in the West, in your, like, Anglo-centric perspective, this is a cultural disagreement.
This can happen. But I think that the thing is that we've got to try and get beyond cardboard cutouts when we're talking about China and understand how it really works.
Okay. Let's
What?
bring in our
What is that? Wait,
audience.
what is the, what? You Westerners might not be used to people disappearing, but we need to learn how the disappearing really works. What?
Who've been waiting here in London's Conway Hall. I'm going to go to the lady there on the fourth row. Yes, you.
My question is, as a dissident from Hong Kong, knowing that I can express freely in Hong Kong or in the UK without risking other people in trouble, I also know that you just now made claims about there's free speech in China, and it's possible to criticize the Chinese government just now again. Can you please demonstrate that free speech and tell us what are Xi Jinping's 2 worst mistakes in the past 5 years?
Great.
He bites down on the cyanide capsule he keeps stored in a false tooth.
Question.
If you can demonstrate to us that it's okay to criticize Xi Jinping, the Chinese government, and China, or even just say Xi Jinping kind of resembles Winnie the Pooh, would be good enough for me. Thank you.
Victor, do you want to take that question?
Well, thank you. I would say...
Thank you. Kill yourself. No.
China need to make more prompt, take more prompt actions in dealing with the dramatic aging population in China and the dramatic demographic decline.
Do you think Xi Jinping's to blame for not being fast enough on aging?
No, I think the whole Chinese government, including the Central Committee, State Council, local government.
This is another one of the big giveaways for fascism. You can criticize the CCP, you can't criticize Xi Jinping, because when you criticize the CCP in China, or from like a Chinese perspective, you're usually criticizing the fascist parasite, or sorry, not fascist, the corrupt parasites, or the leeches, or the traitors, or the revisionists, or whatever. When you criticize the CCP in China, the implication is that you're attacking the people who aren't in line with Xi Jinping. So you can't attack Xi Jinping, you know?
Need to take actions quickly to reverse that dramatic...
Right, the enemy within, the constant enemy within. That's necessary for the narrative.
Aging population problem and demographic...
Okay. We're not going to get a criticism out of you. Let's go back to the audience. Let's go to the gentleman here in the tie.
Right.
Yes, you.
Yeah, Alex, sorry, Alex Vines from Chatham House. My question is debt.
This is an aggressively British-looking man. Every time I see a person who looks really British, the thing that flashes into my mind is like a collage of all of the gangly losers online who post stuff like, and they say race isn't real, you know?
So there's been very bad riots, for example, that's been in the news in Kenya. Some of that debt that's been causing the problem is
Don't be mean.
China.
He just looks really British.
So the question is, how is China going to handle the increasing pressures for debt cancellation? At least 17 African countries are in particular distress this year. Thank you.
I understand the Chinese debt in these large-scale connectivity projects is only a small portion of the overall national debt, because they own debt to the United States, to Britain, to the international financing institutions, etc. They not just own debt to China, but to many other countries. That's the reality. Secondly, there is accusation about the death trap, which is completely wrong and false. Because if you want to do connectivity project, major project finance things, you need to have equity as well as debt. Debt is an indispensable part of the packaging.
Okay.
Incredibly, even though there are problems with that answer, it's more correct than probably any American politician would give on a question like that, you know? In America, debt is like a bad word. You could never say something like debt is something you leverage. You have to be like, debt is like stinky poo. You want to get rid of it. You know, it's incredible.
Go back to the audience. I say I'll take this gentleman the time, then go to the back, then we'll go to that gentleman there. You next after this one.
My name is Sonam Frazi. I would like to ask you a question on Tibet. I was born in Tibet before the Chinese invasion of Tibet. Unfortunately, 1.2 million Tibetans have died since, and we have been made refugees. My question is, Tibet, after 74 years of Chinese rule, is still under lockdown. No journalists, no individual tourists, even Tibetans are not allowed to see their families. What is China afraid of to keep Tibet in such a tight control and Tibetans in such an inhuman existence in our own country?
Sir, ever since the Yuan dynasty, if not even earlier, Tibet has been part of China.
He's so straightforward. When the gods carved earth from the heavens, this land was within the control of the Dragon Emperor, and so it shall forever be. Blood and soil, dude. You can't do that accent. Stop. Yes, I can. If I can do a German accent, if I can do a French accent, I'm not even playing it up that much. I could play it up more. I'm not making a gong noise. Shut up.
Different dynasties, different historical periods. I can assure you, during your lifetime and mine, Tibet will always be part of China.
Why are you so insistent on ruling places that don't want to be ruled by China?
No, Tibet is part of China.
Taiwan, they're not happy in Xinjiang.
And I'm happy in Hong
Part of
Kong.
China doesn't depend on whether you like it or not. It's a megatrend of our time.
A megatrend.
And you need to accept that before you will feel free to go
Holy shit, dude. They're so evil. They're so evil, dude.
back to China,
So you
to
don't.
visit Tibet.
You sound like you're threatening the man.
No, I'm not.
You said you have to accept that before you can go back.
You live
He's
in
from
peace.
that place.
You live in peace in Britain, that's good.
But he's a refugee.
But if you want to go
A representative of a colonizing country being like, you're safe in the country you're a refugee in, you're fine. Incredible.
back to Tibet, acknowledge Tibet is part of China, period.
And what if he doesn't? He can't go back to his home.
You cannot go back. Because China doesn't want to see anyone advocating for the independence of Tibet.
Why can't
no
China...
way, that will never happen.
Victor, why can't China rest on its own merits? Why the bullying and the threats? We're going to break you to pieces, Taiwan. You can't go back until you sign this document or that declaration. Why the insecurity? Second biggest economy in the world, major power. You sound so insecure.
China's security rests on the principle that there is only one China. And Taiwan is part of China, Tibet is part of China, and Xinjiang is part of China, period.
And even if the people there don't want to be part of it, you don't give a damn.
The majority of the people live happily as
How do we
Chinese
know?
citizens.
Did you do a vote?
I will go with you to Tibet.
We're gonna go.
Actually, mask off here. Well, again, it's something that I kind of respect the Chinese government for. It's that in a lot of respect, they do away with a lot of the artifice that you get from like Russia or whatever, where they will just flatly say like, yeah, the stability and peace of China is based on like it's. I mean, at least it gives you something to attack directly. If the equivalent of this on the other side would be if this was a Russian official defending their claim to Ukraine, they would start that right now. They would be talking about how they actually invite free discussion and debate. They're just under threat by like Western degeneracy and liberalism, and they had no choice but to attack. Like that's the Russian argument. They would say we had no choice to. We were under threat from NATO. Whereas the Chinese official will simply say like, no, Tibet's ours. It's ours. You know? It's a lot less dishonest. I mean, it's still dishonest. It's just a lot less dishonest.
Go to Tibet and we're going to talk to all the Tibetans.
And possibly
I
also
can go to
Taiwan.
Tibet, but the guy who's from there can't go there. You sound ludicrous when you say this stuff, I'm sorry to say. Let us go back to the audience. Gentleman at the back, and then this gentleman here.
My name is Aziz Isa Elkün. I am a British Uyghur, except Rehan. And my question, for many in the Uyghur diaspora, we have not been allowed contact with our families at home within the Uyghur Autonomous Region since 2017, when Chinese government started detaining more than 3 million plus Uyghurs into their high-tech surveillance concentration camps. My question to you, sir, what's the Chinese government trying to hide from us? Second,
Okay.
why can't we not talk freely with our families?
Okay. Yet another Uyghur. So many Uyghurs, the same story, the same questions.
I'm always very happy to see wherever I go a Uyghur person, because I do consider the Uyghurs as my brothers and sisters. On one condition, though.
Part of me is starting to feel sorry for your actual brothers and sisters,
No,
I'll be honest.
on one condition, though, Uyghurs need to acknowledge that Xinjiang is part of China. That's a big precondition. If you do not accept that precondition,
hold on.
you are not my brother or sister.
Hold on, so that's fine. You don't have to be brothers and sisters, but can he not talk to his family?
It depends on where your family is. There are indeed
People are because it's laughing because it's so audacious, you know? It's like, what can you do but laugh in a situation like this? You have people, it's like laughing or crying, right? You can do one or the other. It's unreal. It genuinely defies belief.
Uyghur separatists who want to promote separatism of Uyghur,
But what about the people who are not separatists who just disappear?
Turn Xinjiang into East Turkmenistan. This will never happen. Listen to this. Call your friends to stick to the one China policy.
He just wants to talk on the phone to a family member.
Years old, 7 years I didn't speak to my mother. I want to speak to my mother. I am British Uyghur. I want to speak to my mother. Do you understand?
Literally support one China policy, support Xinjiang being part of China.
Victor.
Period.
Do you have no heart to see this man who can't speak to his 82-year-old mother? Is she a separatist?
I wish your mother is here in this hall talking to you. And
why don't you let her go? So then maybe she could.
But then on one condition, in China, zero tolerance of any separatist movement.
An 82-year-old woman is a threat to China. What does that say about China?
I hope she's not a separatist, but if she's a separatist, she will be dealt with by law. Period.
Victor, before we finish, I have one question for you. We're in the UK, we're in Conway Hall, historic free speech society. Could we do a show like this? Could I interview you like this? Could Rehan come be on a panel like this in Beijing, in, say, the Beijing International Convention Center? Could we do a show like this? Audience members freely ask questions. You take questions from everyone. No one's vetted. No one's threatened. Could we do this in Beijing?
Mehdi, if you ask me to line up all the support, you will do that. Really, I can assure you that.
A show where every audience member gets to speak freely. No one turns up at their house afterwards.
For many European countries, you do not need a visa to go to China. Pick up your luggage and buy a ticket.
It is true that if you're a foreigner, you can get away with a lot in China, because one thing they want to do even more than promote the one China policy is not deter foreign investment. The Chinese economy is totally reliant on foreign trade, and if they sort of, it's much the same way that like a random Saudi Arabian guy can get in a lot of trouble for drinking in some cases, but if you're a foreigner and you come to Saudi Arabia, you can get away with a lot of shit, you know? As long as you have the money and the cultural capital, you can get away with a lot.
I'm not asking foreigners, Victor, I'm not asking foreigners to come. I'm saying, could a Chinese audience turn up and ask whatever they want, criticize Xi Jinping, criticize the government, ask you questions, talk about Uyghurs? Could you do it in Beijing?
Mehdi, in China, don't criticize our president.
So we couldn't do this show.
Unless you
I'm
have
glad you
a
answered the
very
question.
positive, constructive proposal to make.
From the horse's mouth. Don't criticize unless it's positive.
Criticism is not the only goal. Criticism with constructive purposes
is a goal.
Will be a better free speech.
Free speech is a goal we cherish on this show. I'm glad to have offered you a platform for free speech. I wish you could offer me one back. Victor Gao, thank you for your time. Thank you to the audience in Conway Hall. And thank you to everyone at home for watching this episode of Head to Head.
Yeah, my pleasure. God damn, that was crazy. I've seen a decent number of interviews with Chinese officials. I think this one was by far the most entertaining. Obviously, I mean, it's you know, it's Hassan. So that was wild. Mehdi goes so hard. Yeah, he does. Yeah. That was pretty wild. God damn. MSNBC made such a mistake by canning Mehdi Hassan. Oh yeah, sorry. You can't criticize Israel in American media. Sorry, not allowed. Nope. Nope. Not allowed. We're like China in that way, Lamau. Yeah, you can be blacklisted here in the West, but you won't have, like, you won't be disappeared yet, thankfully. We'll get there one day, I'm sure.